Alright, settle in. Tonight you're not stepping into some glittering battlefield of empires or the sweaty chaos of revolution. No, tonight you are gently placing yourself into the intricately tiled halls of 8th century Chang'an, the cosmopolitan heart of the Tang Dynasty. But you're not here as a poet or a silk merchant. No, your job is far more mundane, yet oddly perilous. You're a mid-level bureaucrat in the Ministry of Rights, and you've had a bit too much plum wine with your morning millet porridge. The office is lit by paper lanterns that swing lazily in the draft, casting long, tremulous shadows across the wooden beams. You shuffle in your soft felt shoes, clutching a scroll and trying to look important, but mostly you're trying not to look like someone who very much needs to pee, which you do, desperately. And that, dear listener, is your reality tonight. Forget espionage, forget conquest. You're going to spend the next couple hours learning how elite Tang officials, masters of poetry, law, and ceremony, organize something we all do but rarely discuss: bathroom breaks. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're at it, let me know in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through the maze of corridors, walls paneled in dark lacquer and smelling faintly of ink, cedar, and a hint of fermented soybeans that never seems to leave this part of the building. You've memorized exactly how many steps it takes from your desk to the main hall. Not for any profound philosophical reason, no, you're counting because you're gauging how many more steps you'll have to take cross-legged until you can legally excuse yourself for a brief moment of dignity. This isn't something you can do on impulse. You know better. The ministry's internal code of behavior is tighter than your belt sash. That's saying something, considering it's made of triple-wrapped silk. You're surrounded by people, mostly men in robes ranging from pale ivory to somber blue-gray. Each fold of their clothing denotes rank. Each sash knot speaks of a civil exam score that they still bring up during tea. You'd think someone in a position of such ceremonial power could excuse themselves freely, but no. Even urination is subject to timetables. There's a designated time slot in the mid-morning, another after the second bell post-lunch, and a much-coveted final break at dusk. But heaven help the fool who goes off schedule. The record keepers. Yes, there are people whose job it is to keep tabs on when others vanish to the latrines, have eyes like hawks and absolutely no hobbies. Historians still argue whether these records were kept to monitor productivity or simply as part of the Tang obsession with celestial order. Bathroom breaks, in this logic, were just another cog in the cosmic clockwork. If the emperor's bowel movements were charted against the lunar calendar, why not yours? You reach your desk and sit stiffly, knees clenched. The scroll before you details ritual clothing allowances for an upcoming seasonal rite. Your brush hovers above the parchment, but your eyes dart constantly toward the long hallway that leads to the modest, box-like side chamber officially termed usher, or the place of cleansing. Informally, it's known as the fog chamber, not because it's misty, but because no one talks clearly about it. Quaint euphemisms fill daily conversation. Your colleague Chun doesn't say, "I have to go to the latrine." No, he says, "I must inspect the southern windows," and you all pretend not to know what that means, even though the southern wing only has broom closets and one very popular privy. In your time here, you've learned tricks. If you hold your brush in your left hand and shake your sleeve just so, it looks like you're in deep, contemplative calligraphy. Really, you're trying not to dance in your seat. And heaven forbid you try to leave without checking the rota scroll. Yes, there's an actual rota. If it's not your window of relief, you'd best come up with a medical excuse or develop a sudden poetic emergency. The Tang Dynasty takes its metaphors very seriously. You remember that last week, a junior official tried to sneak off during the emperor's procession rehearsal. He returned 20 minutes later with his robe tucked awkwardly into his belt and a suspicious sheen on his forehead. The disciplinary board wrote him up for disruption of ceremonial flow. They didn't even say late from the toilet, just flow. Now your thoughts are broken by the soft toll of the morning gong. One long note, too short. This signals the mid-morning restroom interval. A slow exhale rolls through the office like a collective sigh of shared humanity. But you hesitate, because it's not as easy as jumping up and heading there. There's a pecking order. The senior scribes go first, followed by department heads, then assistants, and finally people like you, the script-copying middle class of the Tang civil machine. You wait by the corridor, eyes on the lacquered floor, trying not to fidget. It's quiet, peaceful, until you realize someone ahead of you has decided to hold court right in the hallway about drainage schedules. Of all things, you stand, you nod, You endure. After all, this is your life now. A scholar with 14 years of classical training, a calligraphy hand praised by your instructor as silken and steady. And yet, at this moment, your greatest skill is bladder control. By the time it's your turn, the hallway is nearly empty. You shuffle forward with a blend of relief and solemnity. You are, in this small moment, a man at one with his dynasty, regulated, ritualized, and very slightly desperate. You turn the final corner and there it is, the modest chamber of quiet suffering and regulated relief. Its sliding wooden door is slightly ajar, groaning faintly as it sways on its hinge. You glance over your shoulder. No witnesses, no record keepers. You step inside. The first thing that hits you is the scent. Not overpowering, but present. A carefully balanced blend of cedar shavings, old ash, faint vinegar, and whatever herbal sachets someone from the sanitation bureau decided to hang from the beam last week. Someone, probably the same overenthusiastic intern who once tried burning mugwort indoors. A mistake no one's forgotten, especially those with respiratory issues. The room itself is surprisingly well maintained. The Tang were nothing if not fastidious about appearances, even in the most unspeakable corners. Along one side runs a raised wooden platform with 3 evenly spaced holes. Above each one is a small bamboo shelf for your hat, your scroll, or your carefully disguised personal poetry journal. The government doesn't say you're allowed to write in here, but everyone knows the best verses are composed in quiet desperation. You settle into the center slot. The wood is smooth from generations of similarly dignified bottoms. The wall in front of you is painted with a simple mountain scene, soothing, minimal, and suspiciously good at making you ponder eternity. You think about the ink brush in your pocket. You've written hundreds of ceremonial edicts, 24 New Year banners, and one very questionable love poem that still haunts you, but somehow this setting feels more honest and less judged. Down below, the chamber pot glimmers faintly with a bronze rim. Unlike the rustic holes-in-ground used by rural farmers, officials of your rank get portable clay pots nested in wood, lined with crushed pine leaves. They're collected twice a day by sanitation clerks with the lowest pay and highest storytelling potential in the city. You once overheard one of them say, "I know more about these men than their wives do." And honestly, he's probably right. Historians still argue whether these pots were ever reused without full sanitization. Some records suggest that the cleaning process involved vinegar, heat, and dried citrus peel. Others believe the turnover was far too fast for any real cleaning. Either way, you try not to think too hard about the smell of orange during festival season. You glance left. To your dismay, someone's etched something on the dividing wall in chicken scratch cursive. You squint. It reads, "He who lingers dries the ink of fate." You blink. That's either profound or incredibly petty. Possibly both. The use of such latrine graffiti wasn't uncommon during this period. Despite Tang China's obsession with etiquette and formality, even civil servants needed to let off steam. Most inscriptions were anonymous, of course. Others were so riddled with metaphors that the accused would need 10 scholars and a soothsayer to decipher whether they were being insulted. And then there's the chamber pot attendants, unsung heroes of Tang sanitation. They're known not only for their speed and discretion, but for their sharp social observations. They've seen ministers sobbing after a court hearing. They've carried out pots filled with questionable contents and whispered nothing to no one. Their silence is legendary. Their gossip, priceless. You shift slightly. A soft creak. The walls seem to breathe with you. As you relax into the stillness, you reflect on how many bureaucrats must have sat in this same spot, thinking the same thoughts, wrestling the same gastric uncertainties. The dynasty may be powered by scholars, generals, and celestial alignment, but truly, it is held together by those brief and blessed moments when the paperwork stops and the pressure, literal and metaphorical, finds release. You reach up and touch the thin string that hangs from the corner of the frame. It's attached to a small carved bell outside the door, a courtesy feature. One tug signals the next person in line that the chamber is nearing availability. 2 tugs means complications. You hope not to need that second option. A few years ago, some overambitious clerk attempted to streamline the system with an inkstone pass, a physical object you had to hold if you wanted entry. Unfortunately, people started hoarding them. One man allegedly hid 3 in his sleeve to gain repeated access throughout the week. He was caught only when a jade scepter fell out of his sleeve mid-meeting, and the emperor mistook it for a weapon. That clerk now oversees rice inventory in the southern provinces. A lonely post, lots of time to think. The system you're using now, bell, slot, pot, and prayer, is far more efficient. Tang Dynasty innovation at its best, ceremonial, overcomplicated, and somehow effective. You finish your business, straighten your robe, and pause just long enough to let the fabric settle into its practiced folds. There's a whole technique for standing up without creating rustling sounds, and you've mastered it. Mostly, before you leave, you notice something on the bamboo shelf, a small, folded square of cloth, embroidered with the Ministry of Right seal. It's one of the better wiping cloths, rare, durable, and definitely not public property. You wonder who forgot it. You wonder whether to say anything. You don't. You slide open the door, step out, and give the rope a gentle tug. Back in the corridor, someone you recognize, Sue from Archives, is pretending to read the wall scroll, but the urgency in his eyes is palpable. You nod as if to say, "I saw nothing." He scurries past. You return to your desk, lighter in every sense. The bell chimes again, a subtle background rhythm to your bureaucratic day. Someone's filing a land dispute. Another is muttering about ink quality. Life resumes its steady, ceremonial march. But for a moment, you feel a little more connected to the vast machinery around you. To all the anonymous clerks past, present, and future who just wanted one peaceful, sanctioned moment away from scrolls, etiquette, and courtly obligation. The Tang Dynasty is glorious, yes, but also very full of rules. You've barely returned to your desk when the subtle ring of another bell reaches your ears. Not the break bell this time, but a softer, more localized chime. You glance up, as does everyone else. The room stiffens. That's the latrine chime, not for permission, but for request. Some poor soul has dared to petition for an off-schedule bathroom break. It's a risky move. Officially, there are exceptions for urgent physiological disturbances, a phrase found buried in the Bureau of Personnel's behavior manual, nestled between seasonal robe washing and protocol for sneezing during audience. But unofficially, everyone knows that ringing the emergency chime might as well mean sending a note to the supervisor of decorum saying, "My intestines have betrayed me, and I lack the strength to hold the line." You glance toward the source. It's Shun from the Ministry of Records. His face is pale, his ears bright red. He has one hand on his abdomen and the other raised toward the attendant clerk, who is currently consulting a small bamboo abacus and trying not to look amused. This is what passes for drama in a Tang administrative office. Historians still debate whether such emergency breaks were truly frowned upon or if that's just how later generations mythologized the severity of Tang decorum. Some believe the fear was real. Others suggest these emergencies were common, and the chime of shame merely added a ceremonial flair to something everyone needed now and then. Shun is finally granted passage. The clerk hands him a stamped bamboo slip with the character, "Urgent," which Shun accepts like it's a court summons. He walks, quickly but not running, never running. His dignity is hanging by a thread, and in this society, threads are silk and easily frayed. You sigh. Shun's mishap means the break schedule resets. Everyone else's time will now be nudged forward by one bell cycle. You were hoping for a second trip before the midday meal. No such luck. You return to your task, transcribing edict drafts on the imperial salt trade. Not riveting. The most action-packed sentence reads, "Salt rations for households west of Luoyang will be reduced by 1/10 for the season of frost." You wonder if anyone west of Luoyang will even notice. Probably not. But the emperor's stamp will land on this parchment soon, so it must be perfect. You dip your brush, the bristles blooming in black ink, and allow your thoughts to drift. Not to poetry this time, nor to politics. No, your mind wanders to a question that every clerk has asked at least once during the mid-shift lull. Who gets to use the good toilet? Because yes, there is a hierarchy even among latrines. In theory, every office has a shared privy. In practice, the high-ranking ministers have access to a separate chamber, discreetly positioned behind a silk screen and guarded not by soldiers, but by 2 stone lion statues and a rather cranky incense keeper named Hao. No one really sees Hao enter or leave. He simply is like a fixture of the wall. Rumors swirl that the privy of the Phoenix Scrolls, as it's jokingly called, has porcelain seats, a constant supply of sandalwood oil, and, most enviably, double the number of wiping cloths. You've never seen it. You've never even glimpsed the door. But you have seen the subtle smugness on Senior Scribe Lu's face after he returns from a meeting with Hao. His gait a little looser, his robe folds a little sharper, his hair not a strand out of place. That man definitely has access to the good toilet. And perhaps most infuriatingly, Lu has published 2 volumes of poetry on quietude and inner cleansing, the second of which includes a chapter suspiciously titled The Flow of Righteousness. You blink hard, Refocus. The ink is drying on your brush. Time to resume. Still, the thought lingers. If you one day pass the civil exam's higher tier, could you too enjoy those rumored luxuries? Or at least be spared the morning elbow shuffle of the common chamber? You remember reading an archived report from 50 years ago about a particularly grumpy official who tried to claim a private latrine for his own by posting a handwritten sign reading, "Reserved for Eastern Secretariat use only." Naturally, someone responded by writing a rebuttal poem underneath it. One hole, one pot, one sky above. No scroll exempts the call of love. A bureaucratic shade, the most polite of insults. Suddenly, there's a rustle beside you. Your neighbor, May, a soft-spoken record specialist, has dropped her brush. You both reach down to grab it and there it is again, that faint but undeniable cringe of someone who's holding it in. You offer a knowing glance. She nods grimly. It's not her time slot yet. You both sit back up and pretend it didn't happen. It's amazing how an entire office, built around the management of imperial rituals, edicts, and social structure, is secretly ruled by something as universal and humbling as a full bladder. And maybe that's what keeps the entire system balanced. Not just order, not just discipline, but the small, human details no one writes into official records, except maybe in tiny characters on the stall walls. You feel the air shift. Another bell chimes. The scent of midday incense curls through the hall, mingling with the aroma of damp paper and warm ink. Time moves. Scrolls unroll. Lives like pots fill and empty. This dynasty is a marvel of organization. But even marvels, it turns out, need toilets. The midday bell rings with a rounded tone, deeper than the others. It marks the official start of the lunch interval, an hour of gentle clatter as rice bowls are uncovered, chopsticks are produced from sleeves, and hungry bureaucrats slowly peel themselves away from their calligraphy for the briefest semblance of pleasure. You, of course, are still at your desk, hunched slightly, not because you're fasting out of piety, or even because you're diligently copying extra scrolls for favor. No. You're waiting. See, the true strategists in this office know something critical. Never go to the latrine immediately after the lunch bell. That's when everyone floods the corridor, queuing for relief after a heavy helping of steamed millet, tofu in plum sauce, and whatever fermented surprise the communal cook has prepared today. No, the real art lies in waiting 5 to 7 minutes. Just long enough for the initial rush to pass, but not so long that your own bowels make any administrative complaints. You sip lukewarm chrysanthemum tea and listen. The hallway fills with the clacking of sandals. There's chatter now, looser than morning dialogue, full of soft laughter and whispered gossip. Someone mentions a botched procession rehearsal. Another boasts of their cousin's upcoming exam results, though you know for a fact that cousin is a dropout currently trading knockoff inkstones by the city gate. You catch snippets like, "And then she said, 'That's not my ox cart.'" He tried to quote Confucius mid-sneeze. They're adding another bell next week, I swear it. And then, beneath the murmurs, you hear it. The light tinkling of the toilet bell system is actually rather elegant. Throughout the office complex, each latrine has its own chime, small, high-pitched, and suspended just outside the chamber door. When the rope inside is tugged, it produces a brief musical note that floats through the corridor like a gentle suggestion. 1 chime, exit. 2, availability. 3, emergency, but discreet. The bells were introduced by a minister of harmonious affairs nearly 70 years ago. Historians still argue whether it was a sincere attempt at noise reduction or merely another example of Tang over-engineering daily life. Regardless, the result is musical. Oddly soothing. It's like working inside a wind chime. You take your moment. Standing slowly, you stretch, a humble, subtle stretch, of course nothing too obvious. You slip your seal back into your sash, nod politely to May, who is still heroically clenching, and step into the corridor. It's quieted down now. Perfect. The hallway leading to your preferred latrine has 3 turns and passes a window overlooking the internal garden. As you walk, the scent of rain-damp bamboo wafts in. Chang'an has been misty all week, the kind of persistent drizzle that makes scrolls curl and boots soggy. You like it. At the end of the hall, you pause before the chamber entrance. The outer wall bears an inscription, carved faintly into the wood. Even the plum tree drops its fruit. No one knows who wrote it. It's the sort of wisdom that sounds profound but might have just been a bored poet with stomach cramps. You knock gently. No answer. You push the door open and step inside. This latrine is slightly different than the one you used earlier. Each Tang Dynasty government building had multiple facilities, varying slightly based on construction date, water access, and rank of the officials using them. This one has sloped wood flooring to assist drainage. A small channel running along the wall carries waste away to a subterranean clay pipe. Very modern, very sanitary. In the corner, you spot a barrel of ash and another of water. The Tang weren't big on toilet paper. Paper was expensive and, frankly, far too valuable for such mundane ends. Instead, smooth sticks of bamboo called cho were used, sometimes wrapped in cloth or dipped in water. If that sounds uncomfortable, it was, but at least it was reusable. Just not your preferred reusable. You do your business, quietly, efficiently, and then comes the ritual of post-relief tidiness. In front of you, mounted on a small pedestal, sits a humble item of great respect, the wiping ladle. A long-handled bamboo spoon filled with warm water and sandalwood oil. You splash it gently onto your cloth and clean up with the practiced dignity of a man who has never once acknowledged what he's doing. Tang etiquette emphasized grace in all things, including this. There were treatises on how to move, when to cough, even how to open and close the door without jostling your sleeves. It's said that a low-ranking attendant once became Emperor Xuanzong's personal ink boy simply because he exited a latrine so silently that His Majesty, standing nearby, assumed it had been empty. You wonder if that story is true. Probably not, but it's the kind of myth you tell yourself to feel better about spending so much of your day navigating these rules. As you step out and give the exit bell a polite tug, a wave of warm air greets you from the hallway. Someone has opened the side windows. You spot Lu again. He's standing beneath a cherry tree, eating rice from a lacquer box and looking like he invented good digestion. He gives you the faintest nod. You nod back. Rivalry, in this world, is never spoken aloud. It's waged in robe folds, scroll margins, and bowel discipline. You return to your desk to find that someone has replaced your ink block with a fresh one. Likely May. You make a note to return the favor, possibly with a plum, or a short verse slipped under her seal box. Lunch is almost over now. The scribes are finishing their meals. The bell will ring again soon, and with it, another few hours of stiff-backed posture and the eternal balancing act between composure and biology. You look at the bamboo slip still resting on your desk. A blank slate, just like your bladder, for now. The afternoon work session begins with a deep chime, and the mood of the office shifts like a tide turning. Quiet conversation gives way to solemn focus. Brushes are dipped, scrolls are unfurled, and the occasional sigh drifts through the air like incense smoke. But all you can think about is position, not your career position, though that's always humming in the back of your mind like a faint gnat. No, this is about literal positioning, specifically who sits where in relation to the latrine. You begin to notice it once you've worked here long enough. The proximity to the chamber of relief says more about power than a dozen gilded seals. The closer your desk is to the door of the privy, the higher your perceived efficiency, rank, or value to the bureau. It's not officially written anywhere. No scroll says, desk by the toilet equals elite status. But it's a known truth, passed from clerk to clerk like a whispered proverb. A real unspoken perk. You, for instance, sit precisely 23 paces from the nearest latrine. Not bad. Better than some. Worse than others. You're close enough to sneak a trip during scroll transfers, but not so close that you can hear the chamber pot bucket being scraped. Historians still argue whether this office layout was intentional or if it simply evolved over time. Some believe the original palace architects mapped each chamber meticulously with access in mind. Others suggest officials simply migrated toward latrines like cats toward sunbeams, slowly, gradually, but with silent certainty. Take Magistrate Wei, for instance, a man who has not moved desks in 15 years. His scroll rack is within arm's reach of the restroom wall. He says it's because of proximity to light. Everyone knows it's for proximity to plumbing. At least once a week, he's seen taking short, contemplative walks into the corridor, always returning with a fresher face. Then there's poor Assistant Chang, who, despite his top exam scores, was placed 3 corridors away, in a drafty annex with no direct latrine access. Rumor says it's because he once spilled ink on an ancestral tribute scroll. Whatever the truth, Chang now carries what appears to be a handmade emergency spittoon. You don't ask questions. You shift slightly in your seat. Afternoon sun slants through the lattice window, casting warm bars of light across your desk. You stretch your toes in your slippers, flexing gently. This part of the day always drags. And then, from the corner of your eye, you see it, the clerk from accounts, Min, quietly standing. He begins the slow, respectful walk down the hallway and heads straight to Magistrate Wei's latrine. A collective shiver passes through the scribes. That latrine is not for public use. It's not forbidden per se, but its users are known, regular, recognized. Min is not one of them. This is a test, a rebellion, or perhaps a digestive emergency. You and May exchange a glance. You both know what's about to happen. A moment later, Magistrate Wei's sleeve appears in the hallway. Just the sleeve, a gentle but unmistakable sign of presence. Wei has not moved his feet, but his message is clear. That latrine is occupied, permanently, by me. Min pauses. The silence is painful. He bows, awkwardly, and redirects himself down the other hall, toward the lesser chamber near the archive storerooms. A long walk, a humbling walk, a walk that says, I accept my place. You return to your scroll. The word vinegar smears slightly. You don't correct it. Let it stand. This invisible hierarchy, latrine adjacency, bathroom access, bell timing, is what truly governs this office. The Tang Dynasty prides itself on its codified rituals, its celestial bureaucracy, its poets and philosophers. But under the silk and structure lies a plumbing system of power. Quiet, inescapable. You once read a note in a discarded ledger that described latrine rankings in animal metaphors. The chamber nearest the supervisor's wing was dubbed the Dragon's Drop. Yours? Monkey's Corner. Down in the archives, the mole hole. You wonder who wrote that list. You suspect it was Chong. His poetry has a certain underground bitterness to it. And then, just as you're slipping into a drowsy rhythm, the door creaks behind you. Not the latrine this time, but the supply room. Out walks Senior Scribe Lu. Again, his robe is impeccable. His sash, embroidered with clouds and cranes. You notice, with deep irritation, that his hands smell faintly of lavender. The good kind, the imperial blend imported from the southern coast. He passes you, pauses, then offers a soft and a glance at your parchment. Ah, he says, salt, important work, very essential. Then he glides away. You're left staring at the character for ration and wondering if you'll ever get the good toilet. Still, you take comfort in the small victories. Your brush is smooth today. The ink flows well. And when you rise from your desk to stretch, you do it with minimal creaking. The day moves on. The bells continue their quiet choreography. And somewhere in the annex, Assistant Chung sighs. You find yourself walking the hallway again, this time not out of necessity, but because your supervisor has requested a copy of the morning salt ration report. And of course, the only clean copy is at the paper drying station halfway across the complex. This presents an opportunity, though. A moment to observe the true marvel of Tang Dynasty civil life, the long walk of modesty. It's a walk you've performed many times, perhaps hundreds. A meandering, silent, eyes-down shuffle that takes you past 8 scroll cubbies, 2 tea stands, 1 incense niche, and 3 large windows, each one perfectly placed for maximum exposure and minimum privacy. You clutch your scroll, not too tightly, and try to look on errand rather than in distress. Because here's the thing, while everyone knows that people need to relieve themselves, the act of walking to the latrine carries with it a complex semiotic weight. Do you walk too fast? You're suspicious. Too slow? You look aimless. And then there's posture. Historians still argue whether the infamous Tang Shuffle, a slightly bent-knee glide with hands folded at the waist, was a formalized walk for modesty, or simply the result of generations of men trying to hide gastrointestinal emergencies under silk robes. Either way, it's become an art form. You execute it now with measured grace. Arms loose, gaze fixed on the floor tiles. Your sleeves sway just slightly, as if caught in a philosophical breeze. You pass a junior clerk who offers a low nod. You return it with the faintest tilt of your head. Behind you, faint sandalwood perfume lingers in the air. Someone from the accounting division must have used the good cloths today. Then you round the corner and there it is, the wide hallway leading to the main latrine block. It's always quieter here, not out of reverence, but embarrassment. The silence hangs heavy, like the scent of vinegar scrub and boiled cloth. You remember a time, not long ago, when you tripped over your own robe hem right outside this hall. Your scroll flew into the air, and your hat landed upside down in the wash bucket. For weeks afterward, your nickname was Rinse Scribe. You haven't worn that hat since. As you continue, you hear the soft murmur of voices, 2 scribes chatting near the threshold. Their tones are hushed, almost sacred. Third chamber's bucket hasn't been changed since dawn, one says. Still better than the archive wing, replies the other. That one echoes. Yes, echo chambers. Not a philosophical metaphor here, just poorly insulated walls and embarrassing acoustics. Everyone knows about them. No one talks about them. Until they do. You reach the doorway and pretend to study the scroll rack outside. This is the social buffer zone. A place to pause before entry, to let someone finish their business, or to give the impression you were just walking past in case the chamber is occupied by someone you'd rather not appear subordinate to. Today, the coast is clear. You step in only to find that someone has left behind their wiping rod. A short bamboo stick used for cleaning, complete with a delicate loop of cloth still attached to the tip. This would be deeply frowned upon. There's a system for this. Clean cloths in one barrel, used ones in another. And yet, here it sits. A breach of etiquette, or a very distracted clerk. You ignore it. One doesn't get involved with rogue rods. Instead, you take your place at the second seat. The window is open, letting in a soft draft, and you breathe in the odd mix of clean air and faint fermentation. The Tang lavatory experience is layered. You adjust your robes carefully. There's a technique to it. One fold over the lap, one to the side, sleeves tucked gently behind the thighs. Any Tang bureaucrat worth his salt can do it in under 10 seconds, without a wrinkle. And you sit, finally, not out of urgency this time but as a gesture, a ritual, a brief reprieve from the demands of ink and parchment. On the inside of the wooden stall, someone has scratched another verse. This one reads, "To relieve is to believe." In silence, the scroll unrolls. You try not to chuckle. It would echo. You take a moment to reflect on the unspoken choreography of this place. Every movement is calculated, every pause intentional. There is no small act in Tang bureaucracy. Even your wash ritual, ladling a bit of warm water onto a linen square, folding it thrice, and applying it with the poise of a temple monk, is something that requires concentration and care. You think of the old story of the clerk who was reprimanded not for lateness or inaccuracy, but for exiting the latrine while adjusting his sash. The official reprimand read, "Disorder of belt implies disorder of thought." Outside, the wind picks up slightly, and the bamboo chimes suspended beneath the eaves begin to sing. Their tones echo faintly through the woodwork, blending with the quiet bell of the latrine. It's almost musical, meditative. You realize something. This moment of stillness, this pause in your day between ink and orders, is perhaps the most peaceful you've felt in hours. Sure, you're perched over a pot of pine ash and fermented pear skin. But no one is speaking, no one is judging, no one is asking for your seal on a scroll about barley quotas. Just you, your folded robe, and the sacred silence of the walk well done. You finish, fold your sash, stand slowly. Your footfalls on the tile are soft, measured, rhythmic. A man of dignity, of routine, of exceptional bladder control. You re-enter the hallway. Another clerk passes you without a glance. You recognize her, not by name but by walk. The same cautious, mid-tempo, tight-hipped gait of someone counting each step in her head. She's learned the art too. You nod slightly, a shared respect. The long walk continues. Back at your desk, the scroll of salt quotas is gone, collected by the messenger you passed mid-hallway during your ceremonial stroll. In its place lies a thin bamboo slip with today's work rotation carved neatly in charcoal ink. Your next task, reviewing edict drafts for the Department of Seasonal Offerings. A blessedly simple job, and one unlikely to cause any gastrointestinal drama. But there's a problem. You glance to the right and realize your jade latrine token is missing. Your stomach sinks, not in a bad fish at breakfast way, but in the slowly creeping dread kind of way. The latrine token system was introduced a few decades ago to cut down on unsanctioned lingering. At the time, too many clerks were using the restroom as an escape hatch from particularly dry passages about grain measurement. Now, if you want to leave your desk during work hours, you need the jade token. A small, oval piece carved with a cloud motif and strung with red thread, passed from clerk to clerk like a holy relic. Only 3 exist per department. If none are available, you wait. No exceptions. You check your sleeves. You check your ink box. You even glance under your seat. Nothing. Lost something? Asks May, not looking up from her scroll. Token, you whisper. She smirks. Lou borrowed it. Said he had a critical offering to make. Of course he did. You glance toward the hallway just in time to see Senior Scribe Lou gliding past the corridor with your department's jade token swinging gently from his wrist like a prized accessory. He's not even pretending to hide it. The audacity. Historians still argue whether these tokens were more symbolic or functional. Some suggest their presence simply reinforced the sense of ritual around every act of bodily maintenance in Tang society. Others believe they were a passive-aggressive invention by overworked administrators to curb midday daydreaming. Whatever the reason, they're effective. Without a token, your options are limited. You can try to request one from another department, an action considered only slightly less shameful than using the archive's bathroom. Or you can wait until Lu returns, which, judging by the spring in his step, may take a while. So you wait. The room seems to exhale a collective sigh. Several scribes tap their brushes in ink pots with increasing intensity. One coughs, someone else scribbles furiously, possibly out of desperation. And then the bell rings, but not the usual soft, melodic toilet bell. This one is sharper, clipped. It's the time card chime. A recent innovation from the Ministry of Order and Tally. Time cards are bamboo slips marked with the names of each clerk and their expected return time from any sanctioned break, including latrine visits. Each trip is allotted a specific duration. Too long? Your time card slot is left unfilled, and a red ink mark appears by your name. 3 red marks in a season. You're reassigned to indexing, a job so dull, it said even ghosts won't haunt its scrolls. You glance at the wall. Sure enough, the time card board hangs there with 20 neat rows. Lu's slip is currently hanging, marked with the character for relief. The adjacent hourglass, filled with purple sand, has been running for 8 minutes. 8 is fine. 12 is suspect. 15 and someone sends a runner. You remember a case last winter when an elderly scribe named and took 17 minutes. He claimed he'd been engaged in profound reflection. His slip was yanked. He now writes festival announcements for pigeon races. Your own slip lies untouched. The temptation to take someone else's is strong. But the punishments for time card fraud are very real. One clerk had to sweep the entire courtyard in front of the Hall of Bureaucratic Virtue for 3 months while wearing a hat that read Clock Drifter. You continue waiting. The time card chime rings again. Another return. Someone else is back on schedule. You're still stuck. Finally, Lu reappears. He's humming. Actually humming. His jade token dangles from his fingers. He walks over casually, places it on your desk without a word, and continues on his way like nothing happened. You stare at it for a moment, resisting the urge to stab it with your brush. Elegant, says May dryly. Did he polish it? Probably scented it too, you mutter. Still, you're grateful. You pluck up the token and rise, brushing a faint crease from your robe. You're not urgent yet, but you will be soon, and you've learned your lesson. Token in hand, you make your way toward the chamber. Today, it's not about need, it's about strategy. Because those who time their visits right, they avoid the rush, they earn reputation, they keep their time cards clean, and most importantly, they don't have to beg Lu for a token again. As you pass through the corridor, token clutched securely in your left hand, you feel a faint sense of power. The halls are still. The bell has quieted. Even the incense has stopped burning. You are a man with access. You step through the arch into the latrine wing and nod to the attendant, who logs your slip's timestamp onto the bamboo board with a light tap. The hourglass flips. You have 9 minutes. 9 precious, priceless minutes. Use them well. You close the chamber door behind you with the slow, respectful grace of a monk entering a shrine. And in a way, it is. A shrine to modesty, routine, and the barely spoken bodily rhythms that govern the greatest empire of your age. The chamber is dim, lit only by filtered sunlight through a lattice vent. In front of you, a row of polished wooden seats, each above its own ceramic-lined receptacle. The Tang engineers were particular about the angle, slightly sloped to allow natural flow, as one sanitation scroll puts it, with faint grooves carved in for ventilation. Someone really cared. You select the third stall, the one with the better view of the courtyard pine tree, and, more importantly, the one farthest from the chamber attendant's stool. This visit is not about urgency. This is about Tang-scented cleanliness. And that, as you know, is an ordeal. You begin by reaching for the long-handled cho stick. It rests beside the basin, carved from smooth bamboo, with a curved tip just perfect for wrapping a cloth around. You examine it briefly. Clean, oiled, satisfying. The wiping cloths hang nearby, folded squares of linen, stacked in baskets by cleanliness. Pale blue for pre-soaked, off-white for dry. You choose a blue one, soaked in sandalwood water with a hint of peachwood ash. A classic choice. Regal, slightly floral, not too overpowering. Historians still argue whether the cloths were reused by multiple people or replaced after every use. Inscriptions on sanitation tablets suggest both practices existed, depending on the budget, the official's rank, and whether the court was in mourning season, when sanitation standards weirdly increased. A strange paradox. Mourn more, wipe cleaner. You wrap the cloth on the stick, then glance down at the wash basin. A clay pot, fitted with a spout, holds tepid water mixed with vinegar and crushed citrus peels. There's even a single hibiscus flower floating in it today, a little flourish from the sanitation clerk with artistic leanings. You dip, not too fast. You've read the etiquette manual. One dip, one squeeze, two passes. Repeat only as needed. Excessive motion indicates moral unrest, and no one wants to be known as the guy with restless morals. This, you reflect, is what separates the Tang elite from barbarians. Ritualized cleanliness. Barbarians squat in fields. Tang officials choreograph a gentle cleansing ballet while contemplating poetry and trade routes. Some even write scrolls on it. There's an infamous passage from a Tang court advisor who once wrote, "A man may govern provinces poorly and still be forgiven, but let him leave behind a soiled basin, and he is done." You don't know if that's satire or not. You suspect it's not. The process complete, you unwrap the cloth carefully, drop it into the disposal basket, and wash the cho stick with the warm water ladle. A final gesture. You pour a few drops of sandalwood water over your fingers and pat them dry with a cloth square. Clean hands, calm mind. There's a shelf in the corner, carved into the wall, where someone has left a tightly folded note. Curious, you lean over. The paper is thin, cheap, but the ink is rich. You unfold it. It's a poem. "O plum wine, O silken night, grant me peace until first light. Let no clerk bar the door too soon. My gut obeys the monsoon." You smile. There are entire secret anthologies made from verses like this. Latrine poetry whispers from the bureaucratic abyss. The unrecorded scrolls of men and women who sat, waited, and wrote under flickering lanterns, one hand on a stick, the other on their conscience. You take a breath and look out the vent. The pine sways gently, dropping a needle onto the stone below. Somewhere in the distance, a bell rings. Not a toilet bell, not a time card bell, just the afternoon breeze knocking gently against the chime outside the sanitation courtyard. You stand, slow and steady, smoothing your robe with careful folds. Another ritual, the inspection glance. A quick look back to ensure you've left everything in proper order. Cloth disposed, pot covered, seat wiped. Tang law does not mandate it, but omitting this is considered a faux pas more serious than calling your supervisor elderly to his face. The latch clicks softly as you open the chamber door and re-enter the hallway. The air feels fresher. Your sandals make soft thock sounds against the tile as you walk. You feel lighter, wiser. You return the jade token to its tiny platform beside the time card rack. Your name remains unblemished. The hourglass shows 8.5 minutes. Flawless. May glances up as you pass. "That was fast," she says, brushing her ink lines delicately. "I've been practicing," you reply. "And you have." In the world of Tang officials, there's always room for improvement. More precise handwriting, more elegant gestures, more efficient cleansing. It all counts. You sit again. The scrolls wait. The city murmurs around you. Bells ring faintly in other wings. Incense curls above the windows. Pigeon lands outside, pecks once, and flies off. And beneath it all, across the palace, across the ministries, down each corridor and through each doorway, other clerks are performing the same quiet ballet. Dipping sticks, folding robes, whispering poems. Clean, composed, and profoundly regulated. You've just resettled at your desk, brush in hand, scroll smoothed flat. When you hear it, the soft double tap of wooden sandals in the hallway. The rhythm is slower, deliberate, different. That's because it's the female scribe's turn. The Tang Dynasty was far more progressive than many realize when it came to women in scholarly and bureaucratic roles. While they weren't common in the higher ranks, women served as archivists, record keepers, and correspondence clerks in various departments, including the Palace of Eternal Harmony and the Bureau of Calendar Affairs. But even in this modest inclusion, there was division. Nowhere was that more evident than in the world of gendered bathroom schedules. You subtly lean back in your seat to watch through the corridor lattice as a small group of women passes by, led by senior archivist Lien. Her hair tied in a neat bun wrapped with white silk, her robe pale green and pressed with mountain motifs. Their stride is steady, their posture impeccable, their route carefully timed. This is their designated relief interval, a full bell cycle assigned exclusively to female staff, placed just after the afternoon break for male clerks. Why not overlap? Historians still argue. Some say it was for decorum to protect modesty. Others argue it was a logistical nightmare to begin with, trying to share small facilities between departments when one sneeze already caused bureaucratic confusion. One record notes a clerk filed a tax edict to the wrong prefect simply because a door creaked open during his sentence. So instead, women had their own allotted windows, and those windows were sacred. You glance at the time card board. A second set of slips, marked with red ribbon for female staff, has been rotated in. Their token system is identical, though rumors persist that their jade tokens are scented. No one knows for sure. Asking would be inadvisable. You return to your scroll work, but the thought lingers. See, female officials had their own challenges, additional ones, when it came to latrine use. The facilities themselves were identical in structure but positioned farther from the main hall, in what was diplomatically referred to as the West Annex, and less diplomatically referred to as the Walk of a Thousand Eyes, because every male clerk knew when the women were headed for their turn. They weren't harassed. Tang etiquette forbade even eye contact during passing, but that didn't stop the entire hallway from suddenly becoming very interested in their inkstones whenever the women passed. Senior archivist Lien once responded to this with a dry joke. "I see the ink turns darker the moment I walk past." How magical. That's Lien for you. You visited the West Annex once, on scroll delivery duty. It's quieter there, lined with fresher straw mats and white plaster walls painted with poetry in light calligraphy. You remember one verse, "Let silence be my mirror, and soft steps my reply." The latrine entrance there is shielded by folding screens painted with cranes and lotus flowers, clearly an effort to preserve some sense of grace. But that privacy came at a price. The distance meant shorter windows, stricter timing, and more subtle pressure to go quickly before the next male bell chime resumed. And don't think the rules ended there. Female scribes were expected to bring their own cloth packets, tied bundles of wiping cloths, often embroidered with their initials or department symbols. Sharing cloths, even clean ones, was seen as unspeakably uncouth, a breach of both hygiene and etiquette. There's even a recorded case of a woman being demoted, not for a failed report, but for using another scribe's cloth pouch by accident. The scroll said, "Disorder in hygiene implies disorder in thought. Let her reflect on modesty among the scrolls." She was transferred to document water prices in the outer provinces. Not exactly a promotion. Meanwhile, the daily walk back from the latrine was just as delicate. No eye contact, no idle chatter, and no breaking formation. The women moved in pairs, always with senior archivist Lien at the front, and a rotating junior clerk at the rear to signal completion of their assigned block. You hear the soft creak of the west wing doors now as they return. Their expressions are calm, measured. Lien looks directly ahead, never once glancing at any of the male desks. She doesn't need to. Her reputation is the strongest perfume in the room. She passes you without a word. And yet, in that moment you remember something else. Last spring festival, during a rare shared celebration in the courtyard, Lien delivered a short speech about the shared ink of empire. In it, she noted that a dynasty's strength lies not just in what it builds, but in how it allows its people to pause. No one clapped, not out of rudeness but reverence, because it was true. Whether in ink or in silence, in scrolls or in the privacy of a bamboo partition, the people of this great dynasty are connected by small, daily rituals. Not just grand ceremonies or military victories, but moments like these, modest, unrecorded, essential. You return to your brushwork with a fresh stroke, your thoughts slowed, your breath even. Somewhere, a bell chimes softly. May glances up. "Cranes this time," she says, nodding toward the screens. You smile. Yes, always the cranes. Afternoon light begins to tilt golden across the scrolls, and shadows of the window lattice crawl slowly across your desk like polite spiders. The incense has changed scent again. Now it's camphor, earthy and dry. A signal to the body that the final hours of the bureaucratic day are upon you. And somewhere, far above your station, an entirely different toilet experience is unfolding. Yes, it's time to consider the Emperor's royal flush. You've never been anywhere near it. Neither has anyone in this room. In fact, most people don't even speak of it directly, at least not without lowering their voices and glancing around first. But that's never stopped stories from circulating. Because when you govern the known world, your bathroom needs are not only accommodated, they're elevated to an art form. Historians still argue about the precise nature of the emperor's privy. Some claim it was a fully enclosed marble chamber lined with silk screens and perfumed cloths. Others believe it was a surprisingly humble affair, portable, discreet, and constantly transported from one chamber to the next like an especially delicate treasure chest. What's certain is this: the imperial toilet had its own attendants. Not one, not two, a whole staff. They were known, semi-officially, as the fragrance keepers. Men selected not for strength or military prowess, but for their discretion, gentle footfalls, and nose for incense. Their task? To manage the emperor's bodily needs without ever acknowledging them aloud. One fragrance keeper was said to carry nothing but a scroll and a bell. If the emperor needed relief, the bell would be rung, not in panic or command, but as a soft musical phrase, repeated only once. Upon hearing it, all present would lower their heads, step back 3 paces, and hum a short refrain so as to provide acoustic privacy. You pause at your desk, brush suspended midair, and wonder, did they rehearse that humming? Probably. The emperor's chamber pot, often referred to in elegant euphemism as the jade basin of repose, was rumored to be lined with pure gold, not for luxury's sake, but because it retained less odor. The lid, meanwhile, was sandalwood inlaid with river shell, and wiped clean after each use with cloths soaked in lavender and rice wine. One disgraced eunuch once leaked that the basin was never used twice. A new one was crafted daily. He was reassigned to moat drainage duty the next morning. Of course, not every emperor cared for such finery. Emperor Xuanzong was famously fussy about his pot's temperature, insisting it be warmed by a sun lamp before use. His grandson, meanwhile, preferred his chamber to include a small water fountain, so the liquid sounds might accompany the natural ones. It said the servants installed a miniature waterfall behind a screen, just for the sound. You glance at your ink pot. It's nearly dry. You dip your brush again, and as you resume your transcription, your mind drifts just a little upward, beyond the lacquered ceilings, past the parade halls and perfumed vestibules, into the realm where the emperor sits, robes trailing across jade tiles, his seal of power never far, and his pot probably warmed to perfection. In that moment, you feel strangely connected, not because you're powerful, but because no matter how many scrolls he signs or provinces he conquers, he still has to go. And he still has to wait sometimes, just like you, just maybe with better ventilation. You remember a tale that circulated last autumn. A visiting envoy from the western desert asked to use the facilities. A minor scandal erupted when he was escorted toward the common ministerial latrine and refused, demanding access to the emperor's own. The poor translator almost fainted. It took 4 hours, 6 apologies, and a ceremonial tea session to smooth things over. In the end, the envoy settled for a private tent in the gardens, accompanied by 3 crows and a scribe who played the flute to drown out any suspicious sounds. Diplomacy is delicate. Still, the idea of that flute makes you grin. Perhaps all toilets should come with musical accompaniment. You return to your scroll. The character for grain needs tightening. The tale was a bit too proud. Beside you, May is humming lightly, absent-mindedly. A lullaby tune, the kind mothers sing to babies and scholars whistle when they think no one's listening. It blends with the whisper of the afternoon breeze. You wonder what the fragrance keepers would make of it. Probably take notes. The day slides on. The chamber pots fill and empty. Cloths are folded, ashes swept, and high above, somewhere between sun and incense, the jade basin of repose waits for its next appearance, ever silent, ever polished, ever discreet. The shadows have lengthened now, soft and fuzzy as if brushed onto the floor with the corner of a silk sleeve. Outside the open shutters, the call of a distant hawker echoes from the market street. Roasted chestnuts, maybe, or sesame cakes. You're not sure, you haven't had a snack since second bell, and the scent is cruel. But that's not your concern at the moment, because you've made your way, once again, toward the latrine wing, not to relieve yourself, but to marvel at the toilet poetry and latrine graffiti. Yes, this is a thing. And no, it's not officially sanctioned, but it's as much a part of Tang bureaucracy as inksticks and missed deadlines. You've heard whispers about the graffiti wall in the second latrine chamber. It's shielded by a cracked bamboo panel, slightly hidden from the attendant's line of sight. Nobody talks about it openly, but every clerk knows. Today, your curiosity gets the better of you. You walk with purpose, head slightly tilted, brush tucked into your sash for plausible deniability. You nod to the sanitation clerk at the threshold and gesture toward the wash basin. Refilling the cloth bin, you say. He doesn't even blink. Once inside, you enter the far left stall, where the graffiti is said to live. And sure enough, there it is, etched and inked into the pale wood, hiding behind the privacy panel, a chaotic symphony of quiet rebellion. Lines of verse snake across the grain, some elegant, some crude, some likely written in the kind of panic that doesn't lend itself to proper rhyme. One reads, "To rest my scroll, I seek this seat. Though ink may run, the thought is sweet." Another says, "The director talks and talks and talks. I answer him here, among the pots." You trace one line with your finger, faint, almost rubbed out. To be forgotten is no curse, if one's best rhymes are in the verse, of rooms where others dare not speak. Here, my voice can still be heard each week. There's something oddly comforting about this. These are your fellow scribes, men and women of silk and seal, of edict and etiquette. And here, in the most unceremonious space of all, they express their truest thoughts. Historians rarely mention this practice, of course. Official archives skip the subject entirely, but scattered notes exist in personal letters and humor scrolls. Small hints that toilet poetry wasn't just tolerated, it was respected. Quietly, like a secret club of ink-stained misfits and muffled inspiration. Some even claim Emperor Taizong himself once penned a 4-line couplet while suffering stomach trouble during a stormy parade inspection. It read, "Let wind blow fierce and thunder drum, but still I squat where royals come." No one's sure if it's real, but everyone wishes it were. There's even a sort of honor code to the graffiti. You don't write over someone else's lines unless it's a reply. You don't sign your name unless you want consequences. And you never write political critique here. That's the fastest route to cleaning outhouses in Lanzhou for the rest of your civil life. You scan the walls, amused, until you find something newer, the ink still dark. Senior scribe Lu hath airs divine, but he can't hold it past bell 9. You nearly snort aloud. Lu has enemies, apparently, or fans with oddly specific knowledge of his routines. And then, beside it, a rebuttal. "Mock not the ones who sit with grace. At least he doesn't rush the place." The civil service, wars fought not with swords, but rhyming passive aggression on a toilet wall. You retrieve your own brush from your sash and glance down at the wood. Tempting, very tempting, but no, not today. Your poetry is for private verses, secreted between scrolls in your desk, not scribbled beside bamboo rods and vinegar jars. Still, you tap your brush against your lip and mentally compose a couplet for later. The mind uncoils where silence rules, and wisdom flows from quiet stools. You smile. You wash your hands at the basin, more for rhythm than hygiene, though the coolness is refreshing, and step back into the hallway. The light has gone soft now, almost peach-colored. You see your fellow clerks moving with that slow, end-of-day pace. A few are already rolling up their mats. One clerk snores softly behind a partition. May walks past, glancing at your face. "You found the wall," she says, not a question. You nod. "Good stuff," she adds. "My favorite's the one about the minister and the goose." You blink. "There's one about a goose?" She just smiles and walks away. Of course she does. The scrolls are waiting. The bells will toll again. But somewhere inside you, a small flicker of joy remains, like the last stick of incense burning in the corner. Because now you know, among the rituals and the routines, the hierarchies and the hushed traditions, there's also room for ink, messy, impulsive, human ink, scribbled in the one place no one ever dares to edit. The light outside begins to slant lower, casting golden bars across the corridor as the city of Chang'an starts to yawn. You hear a distant clatter of wooden carts rolling down the road, vendors shouting the day's last prices, and somewhere beyond the outer walls, a rooster who's gotten the time wrong. Inside the ministry, the rhythm slows, brushes scratch softer, footsteps grow deliberate. Even the bell chimes come further apart now, like the empire itself is starting to exhale. You're halfway through drafting an edict on grain tithes, thrilling stuff when it happens. The rustle, the shift, the faint gasp, someone's in trouble. Your head lifts just in time to catch the pained grimace of young clerk Jian, 2 desks away, gripping his abdomen like he's wrestling a demon made of fermented bean paste. His eyes dart toward the corridor. The latrine bells are quiet. It's not break time. He stands too quickly and immediately regrets it. His knees buckle slightly, and a squeaky noise escapes that everyone pretends not to hear, except for senior scribe Lu, who clears his throat and murmurs, You know that walk, the waddle of doom, the shuffle of a man on the edge. Jian steps into the hallway and makes a critical decision. He turns left instead of right. The direction matters. Left leads not to the standard bureaucratic lavatories, but to the court chamber wing, which means the emergency stalls. Yes, they exist. Most officials pretend they don't. Reserved for high-level crises, illness, food poisoning, diplomatic panic. These emergency stalls are positioned discreetly off a servant corridor and hidden behind a screen painted with dragons chasing clouds. They are not fancy. They are not perfumed, but they are fast. Historians still argue whether these stalls were created as architectural afterthoughts or if they were cleverly integrated as contingency spaces for high-pressure situations, literal and political. Some records refer to them as silent doors. Others simply call them the clouds. Whatever the name, you can tell Clerk Jian is gambling it all on speed. You glance down at your parchment, then up again. He's already vanished into the servant wing. And here's the dilemma. What happens when nature interrupts court? There are rules, of course, a whole protocol. If a clerk feels suddenly unwell, he may present a folded handkerchief to the nearest supervisor, bow twice, and murmur, "The cloud descends." This is both poetic and universally understood. Jian didn't do any of that. He just ran. You hear the faint creak of the emergency chamber door. You imagine the scramble inside, trying to unfasten his belt knot. Why did he triple wrap it today? Trying to remember which cloth bin is which, silently praying no supervisor wanders past and logs his time card as derelict. You sigh. The poor man. You recall an incident 3 months ago, when a foreign diplomat from the steppe regions tried the imperial pickled plum for the first time and was seen 15 minutes later sprinting toward the garden, robes hiked nearly to his waist. He later claimed he was testing wind resistance. No one believed him. The minister assigned to host him had to file a 5-scroll apology. Tang etiquette is unrelenting. And then there are the fans. Not admirers, actual fans. In the event of an inopportune sound during a high-level audience or reading, one or more attendants were trained to rhythmically wave paper fans or rustle scrolls, creating ambient noise to cover up embarrassing disruptions. There's even a formal name for it, the courtesy draft. It's described in etiquette scrolls as a means to ensure the dignity of all persons present should thunder rise indoors. You remember being present for one such incident. The chancellor had been ill, though he denied it. During a particularly long report on city drainage quotas, a momentary gurgle escaped him. Without missing a beat, four attendants snapped open fans and began fanning in sync while a fifth coughed politely. Masterful. But Clerk Jian? No fans, no cover. Just him and the mercy of speed. You listen. Silence. Then relief. A soft chime. He's made it. Not the elegant ding of the usual lavatory bell, but the sharp clack of the emergency gong. A small wooden signal block tapped once to indicate occupied. He'll be okay. You dip your brush again, a little more mindfully. Life here is full of structure, rigid, sometimes absurd, but it's also made up of these tiny, shared understandings, unwritten laws more binding than any edict. When nature calls mid-edict, you don't shame, you don't scold. You just let the man run and pray he tied his sash loose that day. May leans over slightly. He's in the cloud chamber, isn't he? You nod. She taps her scroll twice. Bold. Outside, the sun has dipped halfway behind the roofline. Inside, order is returning. The chimes go quiet. The pens resume their steady scratching. And somewhere down a narrow corridor, Clerk Jian exhales with what is likely the greatest moment of personal triumph he'll experience all week. You'd think that by now, after 3 visits, 2 bells, and 1 emergency evacuation, the latrine mysteries of the Tang Dynasty would be exhausted. You'd be wrong, because just as scrolls have margins, and officials have hidden ambitions, bathrooms too have layers, and none more curious than the scent of authority. It begins subtly. You don't even notice it at first. A light perfume that wafts gently as you pass the hallway to the Ministry of Ceremonial Affairs. It's not sandalwood, not citrus, something deeper. Later, in the records office, you catch another trace, musky, warm, floral. And again, while passing a supervisor's chamber, there it is, a hint of fermented plum and mint, like someone dropped a dumpling into a garden. Eventually, you realize the truth. Officials of certain rank and refinement, especially those with access to the closer latrines, don't just cleanse, they curate. Historians still argue whether incense was used in personal chamber pots, or if it was burned nearby to enhance spiritual hygiene. But you know what your nose tells you. There's a hierarchy of smell, and it's more stratified than the civil exam results. You've walked past the incense baskets, of course, kept in the sanitation alcove near the back garden. They contain narrow cones and coiled spirals made from dried herbs, resins, and sometimes, if the scribe is truly ambitious, imported fragrances from the south. There's sandalwood for the senior scribes, camphor for those with digestive concerns, clove to cover strong rice days, and the most prized, fermented plum blossom, used sparingly by high officials and known, unofficially, as the smoke of silence. Lou uses it. Of course he does. Once, during an office reorganization, he dropped his incense pouch. You caught a glimpse. Embroidered silk, crimson thread, a sprig of dried hibiscus stitched to the seam. When he noticed you looking, he smiled faintly and said, "Harmony requires more than scroll work. You've never hated a sentence more. And it's not just smell, it's sound, too." Some senior staff have small chimes placed discreetly beside the toilet seat, meant to be rung softly as they rise, not as a signal to others but to themselves, a sort of spiritual punctuation mark, the pause, the release, the graceful return. You once overheard an attendant refer to it as the closing bell of clarity. You're not sure if he was being poetic or sarcastic, possibly both. Back at your desk, May notices your distracted expression. "Smells like Lou passed this way again," she murmurs. You nod. "Plum and authority," you mutter. She wrinkles her nose. "Could be worse. At least he's not a jasmine man." You pause. "Why? What's wrong with jasmine?" Jasmine's what the archivists used to cover up mildew. You smell jasmine in a privy, you're in for disappointment. Another unspoken rule. You make a mental note. Avoid jasmine. Gravitate toward sandalwood. Admire clove from a distance. You remember a story passed around during your exam days, probably fictional, about a mid-tier court scribe who developed his own incense blend using goat milk ash and dried lychee. He claimed it aligned with his elemental balance. The emperor walked past his chamber once, sniffed the air, and ordered a 10-scroll investigation into local dairy pricing. The scribe was transferred to weather reports. You suspect he never smelled lychee again. And so, the latrine becomes more than just a destination. It becomes a statement. The truly elite aren't just punctual and productive. They leave behind a legacy of scent, a whisper of their presence, even after the bucket's been changed. You walk the hallway once more, this time paying attention. The room near the northwest corridor? Lavender, likely May. The stall by the archive stairwell? Pine ash and vinegar, probably unattended. And that small cubicle tucked behind the Department of Court Etiquette? A complex aroma, spicy, citrusy, earthy. Whoever's using it knows their blends. Probably someone with relatives in the southern ports. You return to your desk inspired. Not enough to purchase fancy incense, your stipend barely covers tea, but enough to experiment. Maybe mash a dried orange peel into your water ladle. Maybe infuse a handkerchief with ginger tea, a signature scent of your own. After all, what's the point of quiet dignity if no one smells it afterward? The bell chimes again. A junior clerk steps away, clutching a token. He's still young, probably uses unscented cloths, but one day, he too will learn. The scent of authority is subtle, but unmistakable, and once you know, you can't unsmell it. There's a brief moment of stillness that settles into the room after the last bell before dusk, something between anticipation and inertia. Scrolls are being gently rolled and tucked into sleeves. Ink pots are capped with satisfying clicks. The bureaucratic body exhales, but your body is doing math. You've had tea, twice, and a very salty dumpling that seemed innocent at the time. The cloth bucket at your desk is empty. The walk to the good latrine, taken. The incense stall, closed for the day. You stand slowly, as one does when negotiating bodily politics with bureaucratic protocol. Because you know, you only get one last trip. It's an unspoken rule of the office, as firm as the ink on the emperor's seal. After the final bell, only one bathroom break is permitted unless you can produce a physician's slip or a public incident. And you'd really rather avoid becoming a scroll footnote under either of those. You step into the hallway just as two others do the same. There's a moment of awkward acknowledgement. You all know what's happening. You're racing each other without actually racing. The kind of civil, glacial speed competition that only bureaucrats can truly master. You walk, slowly, but with purpose, and then you feel it. The corridor is quiet, too quiet. You turn the corner. There's a line. Yes, even in the Tang Dynasty, lines happen. 3 clerks are already standing outside the chamber door, hands folded, eyes modestly cast downward. Each of them is trying to look casual. One of them, Jian again, the poor soul from the emergency chamber, is sweating in silence. And now you have a choice. Wait here, join the line, risk the gong tolling before your return, or invoke the secondary stall. You hesitate. The secondary stall is farther, less ventilated, lacks a cloth bin according to rumor, but it's also empty. Your bladder makes the decision for you. You pivot, softly, strategically, and begin the walk of consequence. Historians still debate the use of secondary stalls in Tang civil structures. Some scrolls describe them as overflow chambers, functional but bare. Others suggest they were test sites for future sanitation reforms. In truth, they were likely the equivalent of alley-side food stalls, convenient, functional, and slightly suspect. You find yours behind the paper storage annex. The door creaks. That's your first warning. Inside, the space is dimmer, less incense, a faint, damp smell that's neither pleasant nor dangerous. The seat is older, polished by generations, but uneven. No shelf for your hat. No poetry on the walls, just a single character etched faintly into the beam. Patience. You admire its simplicity. There's no wiping cloth here. You've brought your own, a practice more common than officially acknowledged. Yours is simple cotton, stitched with a single blue stripe. It's enough. You settle, carefully. It's not luxury, but it works. As you sit, you reflect on the peculiar journey this day has been. You've learned how incense equals influence. You've seen poetry hidden in privy shadows. You've watched an entire empire move according to bells and bowel rhythms. And now, you're in the secondary stall, hoping no one mistakes your absence as a sign of rebellion. Outside, someone sneezes. Inside, you let go. It is uneventful, exactly what you hoped for. And when you're done, you clean up with the elegance of a man who knows there is no cloth bin nearby and folds his square neatly into a waxed envelope for later disposal. You rise, adjust your sash, smooth your sleeves. You exit the chamber and return to the corridor, where the line has doubled. Jian is sitting on the floor now. The clerk in front has removed one shoe for no reason other than despair. You slide past them silently, the ghost of a satisfied man. Back at your desk, Mei raises one eyebrow. Secondary. You nod. She taps her nose. Brave. You both return to your scrolls. The bell is coming soon. The room is filled with that soft tension before official closure. Like a banquet table before the rice is cleared. Like a garden before the gates close. And somewhere under it all there is peace. Because you have gone. And you have returned. Without red marks. Without fanfare. Without jasmine. You are triumphant. The final bell tolls. It's not sharp or hurried like the mid-morning break signal, nor ceremonial like the midday chime. This one is low and resonant, the kind of sound that seems to settle into your bones and gently tug at your spine, reminding you, you made it. Across the office, scrolls are rolled with a new kind of tenderness. Inkstones are emptied and wiped. Mats are brushed down with sleeves. No one speaks, not because of formality, but because everyone's thinking the same thing. One more trip, one last bell. It's the unwritten grace of the Tang bureaucracy. The day ends not when the scrolls stop moving, but when the final relief is taken. You stand, body light but legs a little stiff. As always, the corridors are warm now, lit by the glow of setting sun that pours through the high lattice windows in golden stripes. Dust floats in slow spirals in the air, dancing like tiny scrolls unfurled mid-dream. There's a peaceful hush as you walk past your colleagues. Some are already heading toward the courtyard gate, while others are waiting for the final cue to thin out. But you're headed for your favorite stall, not out of need, but ceremony. Because the last bathroom break of the day is more than biological. It's a ritual of closure. You round the familiar corner. The sanitation clerk offers a nod and wordlessly hands you the now slightly warm jade token. You give it the reverence it deserves. Inside, the latrine is lit by an oil lamp that's just started to sputter, casting long flickers across the wall. The scent is a gentle mix of sandalwood and pine ash. Someone left a fresh cloth, a rare kindness. You settle in and breathe. This time you don't rush. You sit longer than usual, not because you have to, but because it's your last quiet moment before re-entering the great moving world outside. There will be vendors yelling, carriages creaking, family waiting. But not yet. For now, just the soft scrape of clay against wood. The steady, rhythmic dripping of water in the wash basin. A bird calling from the roof beam. You think about the entire day, The brush strokes, the bells, the walks, the poems, the great sweep of imperial bureaucracy. And somehow, none of it feels grand right now. It just feels human. Someone once wrote, "An empire lives not in its throne, but in the hush before nightfall." You finally stand, slowly, no creaks. You've gotten good at that. You adjust your robe, tidy the cloth, pour a last splash of warm water over your fingers. Wipe, fold, done. You hang the token back on its hook beside the fading incense tray. As you exit into the dusk-lit hall, May appears beside you, arms folded. You always wait till the last bell. "Endings deserve quiet," you reply. She nods. "See you tomorrow." And you both begin the soft shuffle down the hallway, toward sandals and shadows and soup bowls. The building exhales one last time. And now, as the hall's empty, and the oil lamps flicker low, you feel the rhythm of the day slowing in your chest. The bells have all been rung. The ink is dry. The scrolls are rolled. Even the quietest corners of the office are still, resting. You walk one last time through the cool corridor, fingertips brushing the polished beams. Outside, the sky is folding itself gently into indigo. The scent of night-blooming jasmine begins to curl through the open windows, faint, barely there. There's no rush now. Your robes rustle softly around your ankles, each step slower than the last. You pass the time card board, your name unblemished. The token hook sits empty, waiting, silent. Everything is where it should be, and so are you. You remember the poems, the smells, the strange, specific dignity of it all. The way even something as simple as a bathroom break could be transformed, ritualized, honored, hidden in poetry and incense and quiet glances. It's not about what's grand. It's about what's consistent. It's about the structure that carries you gently from one bell to the next, from brushstroke to silence, from morning tea to dusk's last pause. And now, dear listener, as you lie there warm, still, soft-breathed, you too are part of that rhythm. Let it hold you. Let the hush of the final bell carry you toward rest. The dynasty sleeps now, so can you. Sweet dreams.